Welcome and thank you for joining us in this new thrilling FTB Lunch and Learn series in which we will guide you on an expedition through life at Wood. We'll be showcasing a new profession every month and providing you with a comprehensive glimpse into their daily routine, from sunrise all the way to sunset, their contributions and the distinctive duties and obligations that they bear. This type of content is what you have all asked for, and we hope that you're inspired to take a role in energy. So Laura, thank you so much for being here with me this morning. We cannot wait to get into your career path, your journey, and what a day in the life looks like for you. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. We're very happy to be asked.
So Laura, instead of introducing you and reading all your accomplishments, your schooling background, all the roles that you've done over the last 12 plus years at Wood, can you run us a little bit into your career path?
Sure. So probably easiest to go backwards. So currently I'm sitting in Norway, which is lovely. I've been here for just over a year and I'm the proposals manager for the Wood Norway business. So Wood being global engineering consultancy firm, we've got about 35,000 people spread around 60 offices. So anytime they want someone to move, I always stick my hand up. So that's led to us coming to Norway. Before that, I was based in Aberdeen for several years, a mixture of roles, project manager for some decommissioning studies, and also in operations for a decommissioning project, so the removal of a small wellhead jacket topsides. So that was pretty cool. And before that, I was based also in Aberdeen, but for a different project. In our commercial organisation, I was the head of our contracts team. So we had about 14 people in various locations that looked at the terms and conditions. So the T's and C's, the exciting bit that no one ever reads, but I had a team specifically there reading for each opportunity for oil and gas clients. And I had, I think about 2 years of doing that role. Before that, I was based in Houston in Texas for 2 years, which was good. I really enjoyed my time in the US. It was pre-children as well, so you have you have a different lifestyle, you have different things that take your time. So Houston was a great place to be, child-free. Myself and my husband we had a nice time over there. And before that, I was still with Wood, based in our Aberdeen office again. And for about 6 years, I think, I was in the contracts team as a contracts advisor, so reviewing those terms and conditions, negotiating memorandum of agreement and understanding, joint ventures, stuff like that. And before that, I worked in renewables. So I always had a passion, and I still do, for wind and wave energy. I'm from Scotland. Scotland is surrounded by, ocean. It's got superb wind resource. Wave and tidal are really big themes, and their future energy opportunities for Scotland. So I came out of university, wasn't really sure what to do with myself. I was working in a gym when I was a student, and I used to think, this is going to look really terrible on my CV and polished treadmills and did bicep curls. Yeah. But actually, the people that hire you as a personal trainer, those are people who are time crunched, company directors, senior people. So without realizing it, I made a really good network of contacts. So that was a really positive thing. And it kind of took me from university when I was like, what will I do? I studied a kind of weird degree. I'll come back to that. Or a hybrid degree. Ended up going into a small wave energy company. Just 5 people. It was a startup. We were trying to get funding to commercialize our technology. And sadly, that didn't happen. The company couldn't kind of get enough cash together to take our technology to the next stage. So then I ended up going into Wood, which is where I've spent the last 12 years. And my degree is a joint honours in legal studies and gender studies. Started off law and French. I don't know what happened along the way. Well, I do, but it was actually, it worked out for the best. I really enjoyed studying. I went as a mature student at 25, which is a different experience. A lot of people going at 17, 18, there's different focuses in their mind, different distractions. When you go at 25, you've had a bit of a step into the career world, and you've earned a bit of money, and you know what you're giving up to go back. So I think you really, really value your education then. There was always in class, the front row was always the mature students from 25 to 50, 60. We were all sat there eagerly with our pens and paper, whereas at the back, all the 18-year-olds were recovering from the night before and talking about whole different things. And so before that, I was in the army. So I joined the British Army aged 18. I was in the Royal Military Police. So police not always the most popular people to turn up when everyone's having fun. The cops show up to spoil it. But that was brilliant. When you're young, you don't really fear anything, you don't know your limits, and so you go out there and you test them. And I traveled to, you know, various exciting hot places in my nice green uniform with my army colleagues. And before that, I was educated in Edinburgh, Scotland. That's kind of where I came from, where I grew up. Yeah, so to end up here in Norway is yeah, it's not so far across the sea. It's not entirely different geographically, just a bit of a tricky language to master. So yeah, that's the potted history.
Well, what a fascinating career journey. And I really loved how you went backwards. And I think also for you is when you go backwards and connect the dots, you go, wow, look at where I am today and like the journey that we've been on and recognizing, because sometimes it's, we're kind of hard on ourselves. And, now you could be like, I went from all of that, even from, joining outside of the industry to then working at a gym. I really liked what you mentioned about the gym and the network. It's true, you're training lawyers, engineers, doctors, and it's a good way to, you're kind of having like a lunch and learn every day because you're like, what do you do at work? Tell me a little bit more about your career, right? Because they're telling you about all of their work settings. So it was kind of nice for you to realize, okay, maybe this is maybe what I want to do. Maybe you saw someone that had a really good career path in the industry, et cetera. And so it was kind of like good for you. So one question that I'm very curious about is, you mentioned, renewables and, coming from Aberdeen, oil and gas is very big there, but also being Europe, you're very big into transitions, into things that are better for the environment, maybe not necessarily liking the oil and gas side of the, the industries that are in Aberdeen. Can you tell us a little bit of maybe when you joined Wood and then you went into more of the energy side? Was there any misconceptions that you thought about, or maybe even some of your family members thinking that, what are you doing going into energy industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my dad was an oil man, so he worked offshore most of my childhood on rotation, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. I remember in like the laundry room in the house, we had a huge map of the offshore fields, and my mum would always stick a pin as to whichever platform he was on. So although, we were like 8, 9, 10, it didn't really sink in much, but I knew that like dad would go away, he'd be in the sea doing stuff in my perception, and then he'd come back and there'd be a lot of laundry of these huge big boiler suits, work coveralls would be out on the line blowing. And I remember a couple of times he'd be on a rig would be getting towed. He was part of the core crew that always stayed on the rig if it was being towed. And one night we were watching the news and it said, oh, the such and such rig has broken free of its moorings in a storm and is drifting and they're evacuating the crew. And I was like, no! Me and my mum were like, that's Dad's rig. And he was fine, but I'd never really thought before, oh, okay, there's oil and gas, and that had never crossed your consciousness as a teenager. But apart from, looking back now, I know that I was privileged to have a good education and a nice, safe, secure home and live in nice places because of the salary, of my family. So it was never really an industry I'd thought about going into. And also Aberdeen was somewhere that I knew existed, but I had never had any reason to go there. I had nothing other than it's an oil place. That was, the Edinburgh child, it's an oil place, why would I go there? So then when I left the army and looked for universities, or umdenad about what to do with myself, kicked around for a while, and then, right, okay, I'll go and study something. Aberdeen has got a great reputation. And when I actually moved there to study, it's a small city, so it's easy to get around. It's quite a friendly place. Like you get to know people, they call it a village. So everyone kind of knows each other pretty quickly. It's got 2 great universities in it, which are really good feeders or have traditionally been good feeders for oil and gas. And it's also got an excellent medical and midwifery part of the university. So there's a lot going for it, and especially if you go back 20 years, there was a huge number of jobs, huge number of companies from the US and all over the world, focused on Aberdeen. So when I have to go over why am I going to this university? It was great. And I really, really enjoyed being there. But one of my colleagues said to me lately that I always go where the wind blows me. I've never had a plan. I've just sort of gone on to the next thing and gone on to the next thing. And I think that's definitely reflected looking back at my career. I've never gone, oh, I'd like to be X. And even at school, at high school, we had these like career guidance people who would tell you what you could do. And I was kind of good at English and good at geography, but dreadful at maths, physics, anything with numbers really, which is a continuing challenge throughout my life. I can't count. But those discussions never really helped me pinpoint what do I want to do? Like, where do I want to go? And I think one of the key problems is they attach a lot of weight to a job title, project engineer. But what does that mean? lawyer. What does that mean? There's a huge range of things you can do. So when you think about oil and gas, it's a bit like thinking about the army. People think about the army or the armed forces and they imagine someone with a gun running around, shouting and shooting. When there are chefs, there are medics, there are dentists, there are pilots, like there's, it's like a whole universe all of itself. So oil and gas is like that. You've got front end folks out in the field doing oil patch offshore, hands on the tools, physical jobs, and you've got human resources, you've got legal, you've got management, cost control, finance, all of those other essential supporting elements that keep like the front wheels going. So I think I didn't really know or understand what the opportunities were. I just thought oil and gas is people offshore and drilling for oil. That was like the sum total of my knowledge of the industry until I joined Wood. And a company like Wood, which is mostly oil and gas, but really diversifying and supporting energy transition projects, had a huge range of stuff. And I started looking at contracts in my first role for wind farms and for wave subsea and wave and tidal connections. So the big range of things, and it really opened my eyes to what else there is that kind of is not hanging off the back of oil and gas, but is growing all of its own and has its own organic growth industry going.
So in terms of like your current role today, and I think this is what's nice about the Lunch and Learns is sometimes people read other people's titles, like contract manager, and you're like, what is that? Like, what do you do every day? What if I would like to do something like that, but then I end up in the role and I'm like, I didn't know this is what this was, Or, I don't think I would want to be a contract manager, but then you tell me about it and then I'm like, oh, this is another world that I didn't even know I wanted. So sometimes it's hard with titles. So can you tell us a little bit about what exactly do you do, maybe for people who don't know what a tender is, or, what part of the tender are you part of, and, the legal T's and C's? Do you work with lawyers? Do you work with engineers? Do you work with other people that have your degree? Like, what does your team look like as well?
For sure. So the thing I would make a simple analogy to it for is if you're building a house. Okay, so we don't all have loads of cash to build a house, but just say you're building a house. If I was building a house, then I would want a contracting firm that can like do the brickwork, put up the walls, put on the roof. So I would probably want to get a couple of prices to make sure that I'm not just going with the first guy I come to, and they might be really expensive and they might actually not be very good, even though they have flashy websites, such and such. So I'd probably go to 3 or maybe 5 different contractors. I'd tell them what I wanted. I want a house. I want it to have 2 bedrooms. I want a garage. I want somewhere to put my bicycle and somewhere for the kid to play in the garden. And I want solar panels on the roof, etc. So then I would give that package, a scope of work, out to a few contractors, and I'd say, I'd like you to get back to me with your price, how you're going to do it, and any other key considerations within the next month or 3 months or whatever. So that's basically what a tender is. We will have the oil majors, smaller companies, breweries. We have all sorts of different clients coming to us and say, we would like you to give us a price and a kind of method statement for doing X. So that could be doing a shutdown of an onshore terminal. So we're going to turn off the pumps. We need to redo all our maintenance or do a load of maintenance and then switch back on. So we're going to need 200 people. They're going to have all different skill sets. Give us a price for that and a description of how you would do that. Or it could be, well, we'd like to build a green hydrogen plant. So we'd like a concept. Just sketch out the high level details. What are we going to need? What will we need to think about? What are the risks? So whatever the scope is, that initial package, the client will put it out to the market, to contractors like Wood. So then my job is to get what the client wants, so the package, read through it and make sure that actually, firstly, can we do this? Because there are things that Wood doesn't do. We know where we play, where we're good, and we also know the jobs that actually we'll say no to that one because we would spend time and energy preparing something, and it's not our core business. It's like if you ask me to do the maths question, I'm going to get someone who can do it instead. So sometimes we say no. We have a process by which we decide. We have a governance process by which we look at each opportunity. Are we going to go for it, yes or no? And what are the parameters around it? What will we limit ourselves to, or who will we partner with? So the most important part about it is just reading what does the client ask for and then answering the question. Because it's quite easy. You receive a thing saying we want X, and then you just send them back all your lovely flashy data, link to the website. But the client didn't ask for that. They asked for something, which is spelled out. And sometimes it's really spelled out, and sometimes it's a bit vague. So when I get the package, I'll send the details to the engineering folks usually first, once we've got approval to go for it. And there'll be, for example, piping, maybe process, mechanical, maybe electrical, and there'll be a head of area or head of discipline for each of those each of those engineering disciplines, and they will have a look at the scope of work and maybe send it out to their teams, and they'll then have a look at it and write up how would we do it. It would take 4 people 3 months, or it would take 20 people X period of time. So I will receive back from each of those like engineering folks a little summary, some hours, and bit of detail on what they would need. Would they need special software? Would we need to make a site visit? Do we need to, run some specific training for that? So once I have the kind of technicals, then I take it over to the people with the calculators and say, okay, the piping discipline, I've said it's going to be 200 hours. It's going to be a mixture of senior and junior people, and they will price that work and say, okay, now we have how long it will take. This is how much it will cost. And then the client also usually wants to know that we have some competence in this area. So we will probably give a few examples, a bit like job references. Have you done this before? Yeah, we've done this before. Here's a couple of examples. Here's a couple of other folks you could speak to check if they were happy with the work. And so my job really is to shuffle all of that together and make sure we send it back to the client by the date that they wanted it. So that's the kind of high level, what does a tender or proposals manager do? You read what the client wants and you respond to that. And sometimes the client's not really sure. They have a very, very high level idea, and they want us to bring the creativity to the table and innovate and tell them what is possible. And sometimes the client are very fixed and very clear about exactly what we will do, exactly what they will do, and they keep it quite segregated. And it's sometimes harder to respond to one or the other. It depends on the circumstances. But I really like that because it means I send the engineering part to the engineers. I get to interface with these people who are absolute subject matter experts in their area. They have been, I've been a goldfish. I change my mind every 2 seconds. As I said before, I've gone where the wind blows me. I could say jack of all trades, master of none. I'm not a specialist at anything. So I have tremendous respect for folks like our piping discipline lead, who has been doing that specific area of business for their whole career. They studied it, they've done a master's in it, maybe they've done more qualifications, and they've lived and breathed it for 20, 30, 40 years. So I can't imagine being such an expert in that area and really knowing a vast amount. I just feel like, wow, imagine having that depth of knowledge and people come and ask you things and you just know the answer. So there's also usually, going back to T's and C's, best part, there's usually a set of terms and conditions that come with that. So if you win the work, there might be like liquidated damages, there will be certainly some indemnities, limits of liability, rules around if we don't do a good job, if we do a good job, how much we get paid, when we get paid, all of that stuff that when anyone gets a mobile phone, no one ever reads the terms and conditions because you can't negotiate them, right? You take it or you buy a different phone. But with a lot of this types of contracts that I look after, or the work that we bid, usually there's some negotiation back and forward on, well, we can give you this, but we can't give you that, and so on. So then I'll interface with the legal team who will do that red line review, and I'll put that in with the tender pack. So probably those are the main components. We have the price, we have the scope of work, there's going to be some legal T's and C's, and then usually there's a period of clarification. So often we'll send something into the client, maybe we wait a couple of weeks, they read all the different offers for the house that's going to be built, and they might come back and say, you didn't mention the roof, and we'll say, oh, it's on page 6, or oh no, we forgot the roof, we'll mention that now. And there can be a period of clarification when the client wants to make sure that all the contractors have bid for the same scope of work, because then you can evaluate apples with apples, right?
Well, it sounds a lot more interesting than when just the title, because you're part of such big projects that you can then see come to life. And what I really like, and I think anyone who has kind of our personalities, to your point, I'd rather be a goldfish and just switch around and try different things versus be an expert. I think this is a role that, would be very interesting because you do get to communicate and work with all sorts of different teams and learn a little bit from everyone, but not necessarily be an expert, but be able to grab it and put it together to present to a customer. So I think that's really cool. And also it's probably not that easy, and you have to kind of build those skill sets of working with so many different stakeholders and timelines. And you need stuff from all of these people that sometimes, you're the last thing on their list. And so you need those skill sets of bringing in everybody together for the greater purpose. And I love how you love T's and C's. To your point, most people are just like, I'm not even reading this, or this is the worst part,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Yeah, so in terms of, let's say someone isn't at Wood or is at Wood and they have, I don't know, an engineering background or a legal background, or they're just doing something completely different. And this is a role, the lines into the tendering that they are interested in. How easy is it for different disciplines to become, a tender manager? Do you need a specific degree? Or is it something that you can kind of work and cross-pollinate into?
I think that's one of the really good things about the role is you don't need a specific degree. So my predecessors in this role have all been engineering managers or engineering folks. So the last person before me was actually a software degree, and before that a process engineer. So what's quite interesting about Wood is that in certain parts of our business we used to have a specific scheme where people in the graduate engineering program would all rotate through a seat of doing a tender manager role. So they would do, I think, between 6 and 12 months. And they would therefore see all the types of work that come in. They would see the governance process of how we decide, yes, we'll bid, no, we won't bid. They see all the component parts of a bid, and they see the process afterwards. So they get the highs of, yes, we won it, and they get to be the bearer of good news, or they get to be the one that tells everyone, yeah, feedback, we haven't won this bid, we're going to have a call to understand why and how we can improve for next time. So that really makes very rounded engineers, because they don't just see a one-dimensional, I'm delivering a drawing or I'm delivering a philosophy. They understand how the whole machine comes together and how crucial their role is, but also how crucial other roles are. So I think we focus a lot on engineers and the management, but they see how important it is that someone's reviewed the T's and C's, and they see how important it is that someone's priced it, and they see that actually the person that does the formatting and the layout, which they might okay, so maybe they don't have a master's degree in XYZ, but that's a really crucial part of the whole picture. So having that scheme in place that rotated engineering graduates through the role, I think is really important. But back to your question, yeah, I don't think it matters. I've come from a contracts kind of commercial background. As I say, my predecessors were engineering professionals. Each type of background brings something different to the tender process. Yeah, and you can rely more heavily. So there's definitely areas where I'm much more comfortable talking about. If we're in a bid process with a client and they send through a clarification about the terms and conditions, that's great. I can probably answer that pretty quickly. If they ask something very technical about our engineering method statement, then whereas one of my predecessors could probably have answered that happily, I will have to revert to the discipline and say, yeah, but the advantage of that is I learn something new absolutely every day. That is my favorite thing about it, is that one day it can be a really big oil and gas onshore, let's say it's an engineering procurement and construction contract, a big meaty EPC thing, and you work on that, and then a couple of weeks later you can get a really small study for something quite niche and unusual, really high sort of sensitivity around the technology that they're using. So they're totally different, and to be able to see all those different scopes of work really broadens my understanding of what we do at Wood, and all the different scopes of work we undertake. The only problem is the clients, shockingly, they don't coordinate when they're going to send us stuff, which they're not allowed to. You can receive them all at once, or you get a little period. So there can be ebbs and flows of proposals, and sometimes it's like the universe is conspiring against you, because you'll get.
I was just gonna ask that actually. Do you work on one tender and like smooth, or do you have multiple coming at the same time? Because I can only imagine how time consuming and planning and timelines when you have one big project to work on, and then have multiple other ones where you have to really kind of lay everything out and like, okay, we need to work on this one, but I also have 2 or 3 simultaneously. So to your point, it's kind of random. Some days, some months are very high, some aren't.
Yeah, the good thing actually about Norway is their annual holiday period in July is when everybody's off, so the clients are off too. So that's one good thing. But generally speaking, it can be completely random. You can get 4 at once, like buses will come along, a couple at once, and then nothing for a while. So you have to really manage those flows, because the great thing about being in a big organization is you're not stuck on your own. If 20 things come in tomorrow, I don't have to like run out crying. I can actually reach out to the UK team, to the Middle East team, even to the US or Malaysia, and say, actually, I'm really busy right now. Can anyone help with this, and this? And they can do the same. So we can flow work around the group to make sure that no one is really crushed under the weight of it. And if somebody's sitting around filing their nails, then we can find something more useful for them to do. So it's about sharing the load, and it's about the individual tender manager being able to identify, okay, I've got 3 small ones, I can manage that, but if anything else comes in, then I need to wave up the flag and say, we're going to have to spread this work out a bit more. And you can delegate parts of the work, like all the engineering disciplines, for example, they're writing their own content. I'm not doing that, but I will still read and proofread it and make sure that it's making sense. You would be surprised how often people write half a sentence and then you can tell they've been called by someone else and they haven't finished it.
Yeah.
That's not just an engineering quirk, that's something that's not been finished. So it's quite fun to actually go through those steps and read other people's work. I feel like secretly like being a school teacher, red pen.
I love that. It sounds super, super interesting. And definitely for anyone, to your point, that might have different skill sets, they can help in the role and bring their own version to it with, their strengths. But also if they like reading and writing and proofreading, because it seems that that's a lot of the day-to-day is reading. So if you're into reading, this is a good role.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of a day in the life for the, final question, run us a little bit through your entire day on like your typical day. Maybe you have very random days, but let's say like the average day from morning to night. And please include like your external life, whether it's your family, the hobbies, I don't know if you go to the gym, etc. We kind of just want to know what a day in the life would look like for someone with this role.
So I've got a 5-year-old son and my husband we're all based here in Norway. So that's a big part of the day. So I'm an early bird, 6 o'clock roundabout is usually the alarm. And either my husband will run or I will run or someone will be cycling or going to the gym or doing something. And whoever's not doing that is making lunch for the child and like tidying up the house and getting everything together for the day. And then depending on whether it's been my turn to run or my turn to do breakfast, I can be in the office anytime from 7 o'clock through to 8:30. That's my starting time is really flexible, and I really appreciate that about Wood actually, because some employers are very rigid. So yeah, let's say I get into the office in that window. Usually there'll be a few tenders or requests for information, which is like a pre-tender stage. The client is building a shortlist, and they need to just know, should you be on the shortlist for the bid? So usually there's several of those going on at once. So I'll generally prioritize when I get in, which one has got the closest deadline, what have I sent out to someone, am I waiting for back? So usually the first couple of hours are checking emails on things I might have sent out and I'm waiting to come back. And also what is coming pressing that I meant to send out yesterday that I didn't get around to. So it's keeping on top of the most urgent bid activity with emails. And we've also that governance process I mentioned before, where do we bid, do we not bid? Yeah. We will have probably a couple of meetings a week with new opportunities saying go or no go. And there's always a bit of preparation before those calls. So usually myself or my boss, who's the business development director, we will explain what is the opportunity, what our thoughts are. Should we go for it? Should we not go for it? What are the barriers to going for it? What would we need if we did go for it? Do we need to ask for an extension of time? What are the restrictions and the pros and cons? Is it strategic with the client? Does it fit into the Wood strategy of what kind of business we want to go after and the markets we want to play in? So that's probably most of the day. And then depending on whether we have got a tender live, there's often a clarification meeting, so we might have time with a client. So if we have a client call, we'll always have a pre-call to make sure who's saying what, who's sharing the screen, all those really small nitty-gritty details that are a bit boring, but you just look a lot slicker if you turn up looking joined up. Exactly. Yeah.
Quick question on the meetings that you've mentioned so far with the no-goes or goes with these. Is it all in person in Norway? Is a lot of it on Teams? Is it more like you're talking with people in Aberdeen, US, and other parts? What does the meetings look like?
Yeah, that's 70 to 80% in Norway, mostly in Teams. Maybe 50-50 Teams and in person, because we're on the floor that I'm on, we've got most of the management team. So usually you can actually grab people and go into a meeting, which I prefer. I like seeing people in human form. But we work a lot with our colleagues in the UK, in Italy as well, and sometimes in the US, which necessitates kind of afternoon meetings. So mostly they'll be on Teams, but sometimes in person. Yeah, so we'll go through those meetings, and then usually at about 10 to 4, which is quite shockingly early for the rest of the world, I will be out of here at high speed on my bicycle. I've got a very short commute to get down to the house, and then I jump in the car and then I drive to my kids' nursery, it's kindergarten, because they close at 4:30, and if you're not there they fine you, and it's really strict, and it's really awful. Any parent will know to be the last person to turn up and your kid is the last one there. Like, And usually that is the case, but not always. So I'm usually rushing to get there. It's not far. Sandefjord is a small town, and so it's only like 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers altogether. But a little bit of traffic. So then I grab the little fellow and bring him home. Often he's got a swimming class or sports or some kind of extracurricular activity. And then it's home for dinner, and then it's reverse of the morning. So whoever wasn't cycling or running is probably then cycling or running. We're quite outdoors family. In the winter it's going to be skiing, but we're fortunately not there yet. So it's only September. Yeah, and then it's after dinner, put the little guy to bed, and then usually sort of 10 p.m. if I'm not starting to think about going to bed around 10. My exciting life is that I start to get a bit anxious. Like, I need my 8 hours sleep. You get past 40, it's like, I need 8 hours. I need it. You read about these high achievers who can get by on 4 hours a night.
Yeah.
That's not me.
You're like,
I need
that's not me.
all the sleep and all the snacks. So that's pretty much it. Pretty standard. Occasionally there'll be things like a client might have a design review, so you might be in a different office doing something with that. We might be at conferences here and there, and recently I was at a careers fair in a different city in Norway. So there's occasional bits and bobs, but that's pretty much the routine. If there is a big tender or the timeline's really short, there might be some evening work, there might be some weekend work. But I try really hard to avoid that. I had a call with a colleague actually this week who told me that mostly he will work, him and his wife will work. They have 3 young boys. They will work the day, pick up the kids, do dinner, bedtime, bath time, sport, whatever, and then usually work from 9 p.m. till midnight. Most nights, and he said they do that so they don't have to work at the weekend. And I just thought that's not something I ever aspired to. You know, you want to be perceived as hardworking. Yeah. You want to be perceived that you do a good job and you're diligent. But in my evenings, I'm quite protective of my time. I want to go running. I want to go cycling. If I'm not doing those things, then I'm going to be really grumpy at work. And I'm not going to bring my best self to the office if I'm not feeling like I have any time for my own life. So balancing out that working day. Yeah, there's always going to be times when there's an evening or a weekend when you've got to get stuck in, and that's fine because you want to deliver. I want to deliver a good product.
Yeah, but it's not every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it becomes a bit relentless, then that's a bit wearing. And I think more people ought to put their hand up and say, no, I'm not doing that. But it's very negatively viewed, so you've got to take a common sense approach.
Well, I love that you shared kind of all the details on your day in the life, and I think the new generation, they want exactly what you mentioned. They want a good work-life balance. They want to make sure they deliver and they're happy in their roles, but they also don't want to be missing out time with their family and kids because that's super important nowadays. And, you know, people have the option and the flexibility with a lot of companies now. So it's really nice that Wood gives you that kind of flexibility because I don't think it's the same for every company. And to your point, I really liked what you said too on, you know, if I'm not running, if I'm not cycling, I'm not happy with, you know, my daily life, I'm not going to be a good performer at work. And we see that day in, day out, right? When you are burnt out and you're not being able to fill your cup, you're not going to be the best employee. And so it's really nice that you have that flexibility. And, you know, I've heard nothing but really good things about Norway and just the lifestyle that Norwegians have. And so I'm a little jealous. I think we need to bring it to the rest of the world because it shows that you could have great businesses, run really well, the business models, and people still have a good work-life balance, right? Sometimes we think like everybody needs to be working 24/7 in order for the business to be successful, but clearly Europe has such a good way to showcase that it can be done. You know, it's just more about changing that culture and that mindset of this is a good balance for our employees and for them to be successful in their careers and in their life. So I really loved kind of your day in the life and just all the opportunities that Wood has been able to provide you in that side.
Yeah, your day has to be efficient. You know, if you're going to come in at 8 and leave at 4, you have to be efficient with those hours. There can't be like too much slack time, and you have a quick half-hour lunch and that's it.
Yeah.
I think if your day is longer, then there's a different kind of style to it. But certainly here in Norway, it's been quite interesting. It's been quite a change culturally from Aberdeen and also from Houston in how the day is structured. There's not so much small talk at the start of meetings. There's a little bit, but nowhere near as much as other places. It's boom, call, we're talking about business, the end.
We're working.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not here that long, so let's go, you know, compared to other parts of the world. I really love that. So Laura, to end, what is one piece of advice that you would give, you know, someone just graduating, whatever degree they have, and they're coming into the workforce that maybe you would have liked to have, you know, when you started?
I think knowing yourself is really important. So, and there's ways to do that. It's not just about how do I feel? Am I good at this? Am I bad at this? You need external feedback.
Mhm.
So things like 360s, you can get companies for most big employers will support you to do it, but you can go online and get a questionnaire. You can choose some people, and that will anonymously go to those in your peer group at work that'll give you feedback, and it'll be as simple as ask somebody to facilitate it for you and get 3 statements of you at your best and you when you're not at your best. And it can be really powerful. So then you get this anonymous feedback that says that, for example, me, I got told that I was dogmatic, aggressive, and hungry. Were 3 of the negatives, and the positives were like encouraging, inspiring, and motivating. So it really keeps you. It helps you that know what type of person you are. So I did one years ago, and it tells you that you're ESTJ, whatever that means. I can't remember now, but basically, when I did that, I discovered there were other people like me who are impatient, want to get it done, get on to the next thing, not really interested in the detail, not really interested in sort of all the nitty gritty. It's deliver it, go on to the next thing, which is actually perfect for proposals because that's exactly what you do. Get the bid, deliver it, go on to the next thing. But instead of focusing on job titles and descriptive names of what role you can do or what your degree is, if you know what type of person you are, like you're an observer or you're a listener, you don't want to speak in meetings, but you're thinking closely and deeply about what's the subject matter, what's the challenge in front of you. So knowing what kind of person you are, because you don't really know that naturally when you're 18 or 24 or whatever, it takes some of that external feedback and external guidance saying what actually are the types of ways you like to work and the types of feedback you like to get. So you like to get emails or you like to get a call, you like an in-person meeting or you want to go and do it on Teams. That I think is really important and it helps you be guided towards the types of things that you'd be good at and the types of environment and also the types of employer that you want to work for. Because there's frontline R&D firms, and there's research companies, there's operations and maintenance organizations. There's so many different ways to work and ethos of the company that you can really target better what you'll fit into when you know what kind of person you are to start with to try and fit into that puzzle. So I think that would be my main advice. Know yourself, or if you don't know yourself, you're not sure, because like driving, everyone thinks they're a good driver, right? Everyone thinks that they're X, but it often takes some external feedback to make you think, oh, actually, maybe when I said that, it was perceived this way, and actually I meant it in a totally different way. So having those sources of data is really helpful.
Well, great advice. I had never heard of that one before, but it's so needed. Know yourself, because to your point, it'll be really good at telling you what kind of jobs you want to do that where you will be successful or not, what are things you like to do, what are some that you don't, and also even employer wise, where would I thrive, what environment would I thrive in. And to your point, it's not as easy of like, who really am I, because sometimes we have this image but the rest of the world doesn't see us that way. So getting feedback is crucial and sometimes can be hard, but you need to kind of open your eyes to what are some of the things you need to work on so that other people can see you the way you want to be seen. So Laura, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. And thank you to the listeners for listening to this Lunch and Learn series. And hopefully we'll catch you on the next one with a new profession. Thank you.